Hello, everybody. My name is Erica Togiaki, and I'll be giving a presentation on net neutrality. I'm sure everybody heard about the bill that was passed by the FCC December 14th, 2017. That bill was actually voted 3-2 in favor of the repeal against the open internet order that was given by Obama. Um, I'll start by giving the definition of net neutrality and what the concept actually overall means. So here we go. Net neutrality and how it could potentially affect our economy, nation, and possibly your telephone bills. What exactly is net neutrality and where does this term originate from? As we go along, I'll actually give an explanation of what net neutrality is and how our data could actually be manipulated and capped by certain companies. Net neutrality is a concept where broadband internet service providers, or ISPs, produce non-discriminatory access to internet content, platform, and data without manipulating the transfer of data, regardless of its source or destination. Basically, we'll look at how data could be manipulated and how our internet can be slowed down and cause us to eventually get off these websites or actually stop sending pictures or videos. The concept of net neutrality was brought to play in 2002 by a young professor, Tim Wu, of University of Virginia Law School. He wrote an expansive essay on how the internet was changing and how broadband companies were actually affecting the changes in net neutrality. Certain companies were able to slow down information and slow down websites to their advantage, for the advantage of the company. And I'll actually explain in some cases that were actually brought to light some of these terms. All right, so there are a couple of key terms we'll need to understand before we actually go about explaining these cases. We'll start with the Open Internet Order, which was made in 2015, Obama's term, and then the Open Internet Scheme. These are both correlated and basically mean the same thing. I'll give a brief definition of what the Open Internet Scheme is. This would basically be the full resources of the internet being available to all individuals, companies, and organizations, where the Open Internet Order let everybody have free access to all platforms and all data. In 2015, the FCC passed a ruling where they provided over 700 rules created to protect net neutrality. As you know, net neutrality allows information and internet traffic to be not controlled but actually free running. So every company and every website has the right to actually have their work passed on without being stopped. So they passed rules such as no tariffing, no rate regulations, no additional fees, and no cost accounting rules. The order focused on 3 specific rules for internet services and internet use. There was supposed to be no blocking, no throttling, and no paid prioritization. All right, so you heard me mention throttling, which is actually it's actually the same as zero rating. So on a technical term, I'll explain what zero rating is. Zero rating is actually a complicated process. Basically, packets of data that go to and from the internet are labeled with origin and destination. That's how routers and switchers know where to send them. Basically, when information is sent from one point to another, it's actually controlled by some of these companies to make sure either the content is supported by the company or not. And throttling is basically the same thing, where internet and data is actually slowed down through a process of data management by certain codes or certain things put in to block such content. All right, now we're going to go into some of the famous cases that were actually part of the violation against net neutrality. Some of these companies actually went ahead and slowed down or throttled the data of certain websites. Such cases such as Madison River case versus Vonage in 2005, Comcast versus, I believe it was Netflix. My apologies, it's definitely not Netflix. It was actually BitTorrent and Gnutella. And then the AT&T case. And let me speak on those. The Madison River case was the first one that was brought into the nation's attention when the ISP Madison River Communications blocked the voice over internet protocol service Vonage. FCC had to step in and actually sanction the ISP after several customer complaints. The example actually focuses on a streaming service that gave the voice over command. Obviously, any communication company would do the same thing because it's actually going against their policies. They have streaming services or voice over services that they wouldn't want to actually be in direct competition with such companies as Vonage. Then we bring the Comcast. Comcast was actually one of the largest ISPs out back then, and they secretly started blocking some of the peer-to-peer apps. As you all know, the peer-to-peer apps were actually on the uprise, such as BitTorrent. I'm not sure if you guys actually knew about that, but they were pretty good. They were actually unable to connect to the servers, and this was happening for such a long time, but it was picked up in actually 2002, 2005. Then the AT&T case, which was a very long case, that actually happened over 2 years. AT&T forced Apple to block Skype and other voice over internet protocol services for a long time because they were over the top. Some of these voice over services provided free access to international calls and actually was in direct competition with AT&T Communications. I'm gonna have to start speeding this up. Now we go to the next slide. Timeline of how we've lost and how we are losing net neutrality. As President Trump came into power, he actually brought a lot of his thoughts and ideas into the net neutrality world. To be exact, when he became president, the chairman of the FCC stepped down, and he was actually one of the key members in the 2015 ruling under the Obama administration. In 2005, the Open Internet Order was not voted against, but it was actually something that started being downplayed. Trump put two businessmen, Jeffrey Eisenach and Mark Jameson, on his transition team. These guys were well known in the broadband and mobile industries, and their placement in his cabinet made it clear what direction net neutrality was going in. He immediately appointed Mr. Ajit Pai as the chairman, and he was definitely one of the biggest leaders against net neutrality. So this was a timeline of how net neutrality from 2015 to 2017 started deteriorating. And now we ask ourselves, what possibly could happen if we completely lost net neutrality. So overall, we understand net neutrality mandates ISPs display all websites and all apps at the same speed. Basically, all sources of the internet have to go through the same internet traffic. So just imagine companies such as Skype, WhatsApp, BitTorrent, and other streaming services such as YouTube actually are blocked and slowed down. By doing so, many people are actually disinterested in these companies. For instance, if YouTube was pretty slow loading down videos, I personally would get off of YouTube and reload or try another website. So without net neutrality, the FCC can actually control what we access on the internet, directly blocking access to specific websites and specific information. So for instance, if they wanted to actually control information on certain topics, certain controversial issues, they can actually go ahead and do so through the blocking of people's rights. Another thing is they can actually control how quick you can download and upload things onto the internet. This is a direct violation of human rights. The internet is known for people expressing themselves and actually accessing information at very high speed. So now I'm going to ask a few questions to you guys in the class about net neutrality. All right, here's some questions we should consider now that net neutrality has actually been voted against, and Congress passed some bills against internet privacy. Now that FCC has voted against net neutrality, Congress voted against FCC internet privacy, what do you think would happen to our data limit? Are we going to pay for streaming videos and extra content? And another question you should consider, under Mr. Pai's order, the broadband services aren't under the same umbrella as telecommunication services. Basically, now they can be charged or overcharged for basic human rights, human privacy rights. So do you think limited information would directly affect the next generation and their way of thinking? Information could actually be limited and people's opinion not expressed online just because they might not have enough money to pay cable services. So these are some questions you should consider and actually think of as we go ahead with this repellent of net neutrality. So here are some of the pages I used for my essay or my presentation. Went to Professor Tim Wu's essay at the top, first link, and some other things about the timeline of the SEC's destroying of net neutrality. And thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you actually think of what exactly is at stake.